Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. I'm celebrating my 300th episode of the podcast with an interview with a celebrated retail innovator in Canada, co-founder of the innovative, award-winning Frank & Oak, Ethan Song. Ethan joins me with Frank & Oak in the rearview mirror to talk about his thoughts on post-COVID retail and his latest venture, RareCircles. His mission with RareCircles is to empower a new generation of entrepreneurs and brands to build deeper relationships with their communities through NFTs and blockchain technology. What does all that even mean? Why should retailers even pay attention to NFTs and Web 3.0? Ethan gives us the 101 and then the advanced lesson on what comes next.
By setting a total number of NFTs, you're effectively, creating the exact idea of ownership, which means there are only a certain amount. Now that amount can be a very high number, but it's still not infinite.
Right, and that's, I guess, what's provocative or what's interesting for retailers who, as you know oh too well, retailers, we're all looking for something a bit exclusive, something limited, something differentiated. Ethan, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you this afternoon?
Great. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I have to say this is an interview I've been waiting years to have. I've been an admirer of yours and as a retailer, as an innovator, so I'm really thrilled to get you on the microphone. So thanks for making time. And you got a new venture, and I got so many questions, and it's just fantastic. So thanks again for joining me.
Of course.
All right. Well, let's, for the listeners, I know of you well, but let's, for the listeners, let's jump right in and tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in short, I come from more of a technical background. I studied computer engineering at UBC. I originally actually immigrated to Canada from China. And the interesting part is that my dad was in the technology space. My mom was actually in the retail space. She owned and operated a single shop. Yeah. And I guess, I was kind of born into this sort of like mix of technology and retail. And that's always the area that I was passionate about. And so, upon graduating, I worked for a short amount of time at Deloitte in technology strategy. And after that, basically I took the startup entrepreneurship route. And for the last 10 or 12 years, I dabbled in a mix of software as well as retail / brand activities. I would say I'm mostly known for having built and founded Frank & Oak, which was direct to consumer menswear brand, which, over time evolved to include women's wear as well. I departed the company in early 2020, and I was mostly working, I would say, as an advisor and angel investor for a while. And in the past year, I've launched a new venture in the nascent NFT space. And so I definitely consider I'm still in commerce, but in digital goods commerce now. And so I think we can talk about how those two connect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're very humble when you say you dabbled in entrepreneurship. I mean, really, Frank & Oak was a breakthrough retailer. So, not many of us get a chance to do that. It's interesting that you're a hybrid of your parents, right? Both the technology and the retail. Well, let's talk about RareCircles. We're talking about it. I have so many questions, NFTs and blockchain and cryptocurrency and all that. It seems all wrapped up. You've got some funding behind you. Let's talk about it. Tell us the origin story. What's the value proposition? And let's just dive in.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, having grown a business, in the e-commerce ecosystem, obviously I've seen the growth of, platforms like Shopify, even like email marketing platforms and messaging platforms, and how effectively the ability to lower cost and increase distribution can basically create brand new businesses. And so I was one of those entrepreneurs that benefited from the lowering of costs and the increasing of distribution in e-commerce. And so after I left Frank & Oak, I was basically looking for, I would say, the next frontier where I thought that commerce, creativity, and the overall global distribution of goods and content was going to move into. And I had already been an investor investing in the blockchain as well Web3 space. And so it was kind of like a perfect fit where I felt that I could bring something to this space while still learning from where the overall industry is going. And as it relates to NFT specifically, I'm a pretty firm believer that it will be a transformative technology, and that whatever we're seeing right now, right, the early realization of NFTs, whether it's trading of baseball cards or PFP projects. I think those are just like early signs of what the technology can deliver, but I think we haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg yet.
Well, for the listeners who may not be as familiar, I mean, it's hard to imagine anyone hasn't heard of NFTs, but it's a whole different thing to understand them. Give us an NFT 101, and then we'll get into the more advanced discussion around it. I mean, if I was to say it is a collectible that has blockchain behind it, so it's authentic, is that as simple as we can understand, or am I simplifying it too much?
No, I think that's really what it is. I think, my simple definition of it is an NFT is something that you can own in the digital world, right? So it's bringing the idea of ownership into the digital space, where if I own a certain digital good, well, you can't own it because I own it. Whereas previously, songs or content, they're basically freely distributed, and there isn't this idea of ownership. And so once you bring ownership into the digital space, that opens up basically a variety of opportunities. And, as it relates to retail and brand specifically, I think there are two opportunities. There are many, many opportunities in the future, but I think imminently there are two opportunities that if I were still a brand, I would look at. I think there's, number one, the one that, we're hearing the most about, which is this idea of the metaverse and digital goods overall. You'll see people talk about digital clothing, digital accessories, filters, in VR, AR, Snapchat, or these kind of new, metaverse worlds like Roblox or Fortnite. We're already seeing some large brands partake in those. I think that's one opportunity. My feeling to that is it's going to be a massive market, but it's going to take a while before it takes off into something that is, truly a revenue driver. I think right now it's definitely more of a marketing and kind of PR stunt for a lot of brands. The second piece,
it feels like cloud cover to me. I mean, you mentioned Web3 and metaverse. Are they the same in your minds? I mean, again, I don't want to grind you down in definitions, but I think it's kind of important. Everyone throws around Web3 and metaverse.
I don't think they're the same.
Talk about that. Talk about. Tell me which book you're on.
Yeah, I think the metaverse is one realization of what Web3 could be. I mean, look, even the definition of Web3 is, it's not clear. I think, Web 2.0, if you think that like Web 1, Web 1.0 is basically the ability for, an online platform to communicate one-to-one, with its audience. And Web 2 is basically social media, mobile, everything around user-generated content. Then Web 3, what is the clear definition of Web 3? And I think if you ask different people, there's going to be different definition. And I think from my perspective, it's really about an extension Web 2, which means deeper participation, deeper ownership into the experience itself. And so, if you think about it in the Web 2.0 world, there's been massive value being created on platforms like Facebook or Instagram, or YouTube. But most of that value was captured by Google or by Facebook.
By the platforms,
and think about it. Even think about all the retailers that are spending millions of dollars on Facebook every year. They don't own the data. They don't own the customer that they have on those platforms. And, it's honestly, it's kind of doubtful what their true ROI, right, to that marketing spend is, I think, for a lot of folks. So
at this point, right? I mean, I talk to retailers all the time who are, listen, you got to be engaged in the platforms, but they're looking at something you did, which is opening stores to do everything from build relationships to simply acquire customers, right? So trying to manage that lifetime value equation when the platforms have a pretty good grip on as you said, Web 2 is tough, right?
It's very tough. And I think policies and algorithms are changing. Obviously right now, everyone is struggling with the changes that are happening, with privacy policies, which I think are the right policies.
Got a bit of new ownership in Web 2.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll see what changes that happens, right? So it's very hard for, brands today to depend on any single channel. And so, the idea of Web3 is that both the fans as well as the brands would have more ownership in that relationship. And so now, obviously, that's, kind of like very broad terms. And there's going to be many ways through which this realizes. And this actually brings me to sort of like that, item 2 of what I think opportunities that brands have, which is really around community engagement and building more loyalty in your fan base. And I think that's a more short-term potential benefit of that you can leverage NFTs to create. And that's where actually RareCircles, my new company in this space, is focused on, which is really helping brands and retailers to build NFT-based experiences to deepen engagement with their fans.
So walk me through, you create an NFT and perhaps before RareCircles, you needed some coding or you needed to find out how to do it. I mean, it's not intuitive. Retailers sitting in their office, how do I create an NFT? It's not like they can, it's not conventional merchandising. So it sounds like I've been meandering through your site that RareCircles kind of isn't a one and done. You can go there and you will help create an NFT out of something. So just walk me through the value proposition as you were sitting in front of a retailer explaining, here's what this is all about and why you need to pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Basically, the idea behind our platform is to make it easier and simplify both the technical and knowledge gap to get started in this space. What we do offer is the right tools and the right content that allows you to create an NFT. So the idea of like creating an NFT, minting into the blockchain. We give you tools to sell the NFT, which means transacting, whether you want to transact in cryptocurrencies, or if you want to kind of slowly dab into the space and transact in more traditional fiat, Canadian dollars, US dollars. That's the second component. And lastly, which I think is the most important and underrated piece, is how do you engage with your users once they own the NFTs, and what are the benefits of doing so? And so we offer all three components, which we think is an all-inclusive solution that enables brands to get started without having to build an entire team. We're early in this space. I think there's a lot of unknowns. I think it's way too early to start hiring people, right, for Web3 when you're still trying to get your customer acquisition team together. And so, but that said, as history has shown, the companies, the brands that are able to take risks, they're able to kind of be early on new platforms, tend to succeed.
Well, you got to pay attention. It's all a matter of degree, right? It's not like there's it's not like there's nothing to occupy our minds these days. So, all right. So let's walk through this. So I've got a logo in front of me, actually, from my barbecue show, which I kind of like, and I want to create it as an NFT. Walk me through. So I go onto your site and I pay money to you to do that. So walk me just through the business model. Let's say I don't want to use cryptocurrency. What did you call it? Fiat currency? So the old school. I just want to create an NFT, and that would be interesting for me to, as you say, dive in. So walk me through what I would do and how the business model works.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a business model perspective, it's very simple. It's basically a monthly subscription, and so we don't take any large kind of upfront fee. We're not an agency, so you don't have to get a custom solution built just for you and have to support that going on. So actually, it ends up being very affordable to do so. But effectively, you would go on, create your profile. You would basically go through a checklist of items for the NFT and set the right parameters. And if you don't know, obviously we provide content and support to make those decisions. Once you do that,
what are some of the key decisions? So I have no idea what I'm doing. So walk me through what would one or two of the three key decisions to be thinking about even before I visit your platform. Give me a sense of what those decisions would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is I would definitely kind of think about what are the goals we're trying to achieve with these NFTs, right? Is the idea to monetize, meaning we want to generate revenue? Is the idea to build deeper loyalty in our 1,000 true fans? Is the idea of selling one or two pieces to raise money for charities? So I think having a clear goal in mind before getting started would help. So that's the first thing. The second thing is thinking about what is the size of the release, meaning how many NFTs will I create, but more importantly, how many people I want to hold this NFT. So as an example, if I want to create a membership program for my top influencers for my brand, then maybe 1,000 is the right number, maybe 500 is the right number. So I think the issuance, the number matters a lot. And then the third piece I would say is just figuring out how you're going to engage those users after they have the NFTs. But I think to make it simple, it's really just a question of why are we doing this? What are the NFTs and what is the price and the issuance number? And I think that would get you started.
So I guess it's kind of like a fine art print where you make 1 of 100, 2 of 100. So if I wanted to issue 100, and there's only ever going to be 100, and that creates the market, right? In other words, there's not going to be 1 million of these things out there. I'm going to decide I only want to create 100, and each one would be demarcated as 1 or 2 or 99 of 100. Is that right?
That's one way of doing it. Or you can have 100 that are all unique and the visuals. So I think both of these can work. But yeah, effectively, by setting a total number of NFTs, you're effectively creating the exact idea of ownership, which means there are only a certain amount. Now that amount can be a very high number, but it's still not infinite.
Right, and that's, I guess, what's provocative or what's interesting for retailers who, as you know oh too well, retailers, we're all looking for something a bit exclusive, something limited, something differentiated. So is this that opportunity? Maybe it's that by virtue of the fact that there's only a limited number, whatever that number is, it's created, and that's why retailers, you think, should be paying attention to this.
I think for retailers, I think it really. So when we say retailer, it's a very broad kind of sentence, right? So I think one thing I really believe in, and something that I feel like is going to be really important for all people that are selling consumer goods in the future is this idea of building a strong community around your product or your brand. Mm-hmm. We're seeing more and more that channel differentiation ultimately doesn't matter that much. I think everyone's going omni-channel. Everyone's going to be in every social media platform. And so differentiation is very difficult, and competition is at the highest level ever because it's globalized and it's very easy to start a new brand. And so it's this idea of like death by 1,000 cuts, right? Your competitor is not the store that's in front of you in the mall anymore. It's basically anyone in the world, including someone who's in their basement. And so if you take that into account, I would say the brands that have the strongest, most dedicated, most engaged communities are going to be the ones that effectively succeed in the future. And that's something I truly believe in. All the other optimizations of conversion optimization on a website, ads optimization, yes, they matter, but they're not significant to shift basically the overall momentum between yourself and another brand that either has a better or worse community. And so within that perspective, I would say I would think of NFTs as a way to either build a community or strengthen the community as a first goal. And the second goal, of course, I think it is appealing for brands and retailers to be able to sell digital goods because digital goods come with a 95% margin, which, as we all know, with all the supply chain issues that we're seeing, is not the case for physical goods, right? So it's definitely attractive, and you're seeing new brands being built. I mean, a lot of the NFT projects, I think if you look at something like Bored Ape, obviously, which has a tremendous amount of success, but there's a bunch of other ones. People think of them as like JPEGs.
What retailers have done that you can think of that have done a successful NFT? So that what would you point to? Any examples that you'd call out for us to go look at?
I mean, I actually think that once again, the term retailer is not the right term here. I think that from a brand perspective, Nike and Adidas have done very successful launches. Adidas has even partnered with Bored Ape, which is a crypto native NFT project. So I think that they're thinking the right way. And they're thinking of it as an extension of their brand, as an extension of their community. So I think that we're going to see more and more examples of that. And, we are working with some of the top brands on our side, which, some of those projects will be revealed in the next few months. But
exciting.
What you're going to see is that I think the ones that are at the forefront of culture, that are at the forefront of being close to their customers, are going to be the ones that dabble the first in the space. A streetwear brand called The Hundreds in the US has done an amazing job at that. That's something anyone on this podcast can look up. But I definitely think we're going to see more and more examples. Once again, because I'm going broader with the definition of retailers, I think that, food and beverage is going to be a space where there's going to be tremendous innovation in terms of just creating more loyalty to NFTs.
Yeah, I guess it's true. I mean, retailers or brand or whatever, but I'm just trying to anchor it in where to go look. So you've given us a couple of great examples. Now, one last thing: you've always had a strong orientation towards responsible environmental responsibility, and is that an essence of this product as well? So I hear two schools to that, two sides of that the blockchain is a large consumer of electricity and power, and then obviously you're doing digital goods, so there's not a lot of waste or production or all that stuff. How do you think about that? Is this front of how you think about this initiative, or is it something that just comes alongside?
I mean, I think it's important no matter what initiative you take on, and it's definitely something obviously I've always cared about, in my personal life, and obviously there's criticism, about the blockchain around the energy usage and energy consumption, mainly because of the way that, you have to run basically the blockchain, the layer ones of this world. And, there's a lot of energy that requires in mining and basically, which, people often think about Bitcoin mining in that case, which, they when you think about that, they see like rooms and rooms of servers that are basically, consuming energy. And that is actually true. That is happening. Now, that said, I would say that, the new technologies that are coming, especially with Ethereum 2.0 and even Solana, or Polygon. And now I'm throwing like names that most likely people on this call, on this podcast don't know, but some of the new, like a lot of companies right now are tackling this issue. And I think
there's better coming is what you're saying. There's better.
And it's coming very quickly. I would say probably in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think the energy consumption issue in the blockchain is real, but to a certain extent is much easier to solve than physical infrastructure. Than global supply chain, air freight or physical locations. I think that's a much more difficult equation to solve. But ultimately, I do think that we're going to see more digital consumption. I do think that we're going to see also more higher quality consumption, meaning you're really going to see the world move into two directions, which is like pure commodities at a very low cost. And more premium products where people really care about the brands that they buy from, and we saw that during COVID, and I think that's just going to get it more accentuated going forward.
Well, that's a nice segue. I can't have you on the microphone with your experience without tapping into your retail wisdom and your brand wisdom. Thoughts about the COVID era? Has retail been changed from your perspective? Some talk about it being accelerating. Some of the trends that already were existing accelerated after this couple of 3 years. I mean, we're not quite out of it yet. What's changed? I mean, have consumers changed? As the industry changed? How do you reflect on it?
I mean, I think everything's changed, and I think things have changed at a deeper level. Obviously, if you look at obviously the stock market is down right now, but obviously the trends towards even e-commerce have a lot of up and downs. But I don't think those things matter. I think the longer terms impact of what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years will really be impactful. I agree with you that from just a pure digital, consumption or e-commerce perspective, we've accelerated by, some people are saying 10 years, but I would say at least 5-6 years in terms of the general adoption. Despite the fact that some of those, let's call it COVID stocks, are being hit, by the public market today. There's no doubt that e-commerce is going to continue growing. There's no doubt that like work from home is going to continue growing. That like tools enable people to work from anywhere. That's changed completely how a large portion of the population wants to live their life. And so
that feels to me one of the biggest changes. I want to see your thoughts, the work from home, because it's not like the technology didn't exist pre-COVID and the before time, but it feels that took a cultural change for workplaces to change, because it wasn't about technology. You could always outsource technology, but you would never, would you have hired in your leadership roles, would you have hired in the before time someone like a senior leader who was not located in your head office? Was that part of your culture, or do you think that's changed for you? And for
no, we wouldn't have done it. I mean, we did it, and we were trying to basically move people around. Like the really expensive kind of relocation, type deals, which I know a lot of retailers
Montreal,
did.
right? You were based in Montreal.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to be a vice president of marketing, you're going to be in the office in Montreal, right? And if you had to do, I had to do it all over again, but if you were doing the same thing today,
it's kind of crazy to say, but like 5 years ago, it was hard to get someone from Toronto to move to Montreal.
Sure.
But now the reality is that you can hire from anywhere. And so, and like, even if we're RareCircles, our team is, decentralized, remote first. And so like we have people everywhere. And, like, I agree with you. Like early on, I would have had some concerns just around like, okay, like team engagement, culture, or like even just like, work dynamics. But I realized that one, it's the reality of the world, and there's tremendous benefits, I think, for both what a company can do, but also for the lifestyle of the people involved. But I definitely think that that's a big trend, right? It has nothing to do with selling stuff, but it's a big trend because what it means is that, one, you can hire from anywhere in the world, but it also means that the best talent in any city won't be limited to the opportunities in that city alone.
Right.
All right. So I think that's a big shift.
And that was a challenge for you. I know that's a challenge for a lot of Montreal brands, or Toronto brands or whatever, Vancouver brands, because you've got to broach beyond that addressable market right now. How are you building team though amongst RareCircles? Do you get people together? Do you fly them all in? Like, you still need to build some kind of adhesion, some kind of cohesion to your culture, right? To move your vision forward, no?
I think you need to have, look, it's not a simple answer. And I think all of us are going to find out in the next few years what the challenges come with. I think you need to have a strong, well-defined culture. I think you need to have like clear processes of like, when are the meetings happening? How should people communicate with each other? So that matters a lot, and you need to invest time in that. I do think that, getting people together like once or twice or 3-4 times a year, I think makes sense. So this idea of like hubs, which I know Shopify is doing as well, I think that makes sense to me. But ultimately, on the other hand, I think accountability to me is the most important thing, because you're not there, you don't see people work. But that said, you want to hire people that are highly accountable and will effectively get the job done regardless of what you do. And so that to me, once again, is the most important piece. And I do think that for a lot of companies out there, it will be a challenge. And it will be a challenge not just to hire, but to even retain, because, the best companies in the world with the capital, that they have at their disposition they're coming for your best talent. And it's definitely something that I would be worried about. Now, just to finalize the kind of where I see, commerce going, the other trend obviously, is that omnichannel, is not even it's not a buzzword anymore. Everyone needs to be omnichannel. Everyone needs to be global.
Table stakes. Table stakes now.
It's table stake, right? So now how do you manage that, the complexity of such business, within physical goods? How do you think about, your store, basically, even, network? How do you think about your distribution network? I think there's going to be technology challenges and be strategy challenges. But in the end, as I said before, I think investing in your community, and your community is all the stakeholders within, your company or your brand. I think that's going to be the single most important thing to invest in.
The differentiator, right? If we say table stakes versus differentiators, that's great advice. Now, speaking of advice, last question, 2 starts, one-stop advice for the listeners as they look forward, knowing what with your experience, all the new ventures that you've been looking at, 2 things they should start doing and 1 thing they should stop doing.
I think 2 things they should start doing. One is focus on their best customers and like double down on recognize who those customers are and double down on them. And I guess that links to, the what not to do is to try to go too broad and try to think that everyone should be your customer. I think that's not going to be a winning strategy going forward. The second piece is take more risk. The speed is the speed of the world is moving so fast now. Obviously, we've seen that during COVID, that this idea of like studying something for a year or 2 and then implementing it for another year or 2, it's too slow, and you're likely going to fall behind. The risk of not moving fast is much higher than the risk of moving faster. And so everyone needs to take more risk, and you need to build your company so that you can absorb failure. So basically focus on your best customer and take more risk, and don't go too broad.
And be confident, I guess, if I unpack that a little bit, be confident that just because it's not perfect, I know in the tech world, it's, minimum viable product kind of thing, but is that a key too, right? For business people, is like, don't get hung up on perfection, just put it out there. Do you think consumers are changing in that they accept flaws more now? Or it's a real paradox, right? On the one hand, consumers are savage, right? They're savvy and they just hate any imperfection. On the other hand, you want to get stuff out in the market, even though it's not perfect. Like, it feels like we're at this kind of pivot point where you're trying to do both things. You have to keep up to the pace of change, but at the same time, don't disappoint your customers, and their expectations are going up, not down. Like, it's a real challenge, right?
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge, but that's the reason why, my kind of third piece of advice is to figure out what you want to be the best at and stick to that. And what I mean by that is, if you're more focused on one area or one customer or one specific set of values, and then you become the most mission-driven company around that, then you can take a lot of risk against that because you're known for that. If you spread yourself too thin, and all of a sudden you're speaking about all different kinds of social issues, things that you don't understand, things that you've never contributed in the past, then absolutely you're going to get customer backlash and you're going to hear about it very, very quickly.
Well, all right. Well, this has been great. Where do folks go to learn more about RareCircles, or get in touch with you? Are you a LinkedIn guy? Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, if you want to get in touch, I would say Twitter is probably the easiest. I'm at Mr. Ethan Song on Twitter. If not, RareCircles.com is where you can learn more about the NFT business.
Well, Ethan, such a treat to chat with you. As always, interesting and unexpected, and anticipating great things ahead. So congratulations on your success, and I wish you much continued success with everything you're working on. We'll be watching.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning into this special episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, be sure and click and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically twice a week. And check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Conversations with Commerce Next podcast, and the Food Professor podcast with Dr. Sylvain Charlevoix. Last but not least, if you're into barbecue, check out my all-new YouTube barbecue show, Last Request Barbecue, with new episodes each and every week. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of ME LeBlanc Company and Maven Media. And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone.